Hey everybody, this is Michael Mann from Michael Mann Security Services, and this is a podcast dedicated to helping you protect the people and things you love most. And remember, it's about prevention, not response.
All right, Michael, so sometimes when it comes to security, this phrase pops up, and people might not be as familiar with it as they probably should be. It's called use of force. What is use of force?
Yes, so use of force is any kind of force or any actions that I use against someone else. Basically, or generally, there are two types of force. There's deadly force and there's non-deadly force. Defined, deadly force is any force likely to or intended to cause death or serious bodily injury. And if you're in the state of Tennessee or live here and you've got a carry permit, you should have that definition memorized, or your instructor should have told you to memorize that when you went to the carry permit class.
That's deadly force.
That is deadly force. And when we talk about non-deadly force, that's going to be any force that doesn't cause death or serious bodily injury. So that's like, somebody pushes you, or you have to escort someone out of, say, a sanctuary or outside of your office space.
Where you have to physically grab somebody.
Yeah. So escorting someone out. So any force that does not cause death or serious bodily injury.
So why do we need to know this?
Reason you know it is, just as a person, as someone that lives here in the state of Tennessee, whether you're at work, you're at church, you're out in the mall with your family, and something happens, any force that you use against someone else, there are going to be legal ramifications for that use of force. And so the reason why you need to know it is so you understand when you can use it, when you can't use it, and if you do use it, what the legal ramifications are going to be.
Yeah, that's what I find to be kind of it's the technical side of weapons training is making sure you know all the rules, and because if you're just a layperson trying to get into it, you really want to make sure you're doing it the right way. And what's a good rule of thumb, I suppose, for that when it comes to using force?
Yeah, the best way to understand, to know when to use force is even beyond the training or class that you take, do research on your own. So
do the research.
Yeah, so here's what happens. I'll teach a defensive handgun class, and I'll ask everyone in the class who's had their carry permit class. Let's say 40% of the people raise their hand, and I'll ask, hey, what's deadly force? What's non-deadly force? Very seldom do I ever get an answer back on that. So everybody's had a carry permit class. Some of them are carrying a weapon, some of them aren't, and they don't. Number one, not only do they not know the definition, but when I get to the use of force, that module, when we start teaching that in the class, no one has any answers. And not that I'm expecting those answers. That's what they're there for. They want to learn. But it's just something after the class, they get up and leave, and you don't think about it again because it's something you just don't do every day, right? You get your carry permit class, you go to work the next day.
You go about your business.
Yeah, you don't think about it. You're not worried about it.
Well, okay, so let's say what happens if I do use force then?
Yeah, if you do use force, just a couple things to think about prior to. So some things to remember if you do use force, because if you do, some things could happen. One, I would suggest if you have to use force, whether that force is deadly or non-deadly, you contact the police. Yeah. Like the law enforcement should find out if you do that.
Don't do it and then
just
bury the bodies.
Like run away. Defend yourself.
Nothing to see here.
See you later.
That's awesome.
So some things to remember, right? So number one, why was I in this situation? So that's the first thing to remember. This is some reporting stuff. Mm-hmm. So some things to think about, some visualization prior to, right? So, why were you there and what caused you to be there and what led you to this situation? Number two, what did you do to stay away from that incident? So what actions do you take to not use force? So remember, it's all about prevention, not response, right? So what did I do to not have to respond?
Or were you running in guns blazing looking for the fight?
Yeah, this whole idea that, because I've got a carry permit, I'm going to run in and, save everybody, in the grocery store.
Yeah.
That's not the way we should think about this. We should be thinking about prevention first. So what is it? What did I do not to get into this? And then if you did get in the situation, exactly what did you say? What did you tell the person? What was their response? What did you do when we talk about force? Did you use, so if it was a deadly force situation, what non-deadly force did you use before, if that was possible? What did that look like and what happened when you did that? And then
what other options did you?
Yeah,
did you go after?
absolutely. What other options did you have,
Yeah.
and did you use those options? All of these things are things to think about or remember, because if it turns into deadly force, you're probably going to go to court. And if it gets to the point where it does go to court, whether that's a criminal court or civil court, some other people to make a decision on this are going to have to put themselves in your shoes. We call this the reasonable person theory, or it's based on what a reasonable person would believe.
Yeah.
Right? Would they do the same thing that you did? And so these are some things that you need to remember prior to going into it.
My wife always says I'm unreasonable, so there's just no chance I would ever be found reasonable by anybody. I'm always unreasonable.
I don't believe that, Steve. I don't believe that at all.
So then play this into, some people, they hide their handguns. Some people open carry. I don't know necessarily why some people choose to do one or the other aside from personal preference, but maybe get into the intricacies of that.
Yeah, so open carry. Let's talk about that, because it's my understanding at the first of the year that some laws are going to change in the state of Tennessee in 2020, and there's going to be the ability to open carry without training, and so that's something I understand that's coming.
A lot of states do things like that, don't they?
They do.
It's kind of a hodgepodge around the U.S.
Yeah, and in this state right now, if you have a carry permit, if you choose to, you can open carry. So let's talk about that. It's my opinion that if you have a carry permit and you can legally carry, that you should carry concealed. There's not any study, as I'll tell you as a security professional, someone that does this for a living and does this for big corporations and for, small businesses and churches, there's not any study or any data out there that shows that the gun prevents violence. Guns do not prevent violence, and they don't necessarily deter violence. So the idea of open carry, if I thought about it, for me, I would think that people would do that because they believe it deters or stops something. Well, there's not any data out there that shows that's the case.
Well, you also lose the element of surprise.
Absolutely. So if I do have to respond from the bad guy's perspective to be successful, we've talked about this in the past. You and me have. They have to have the element of surprise to be successful to conduct an attack. Well, if we're having to respond, we're attacking, and you're absolutely right. What that does is that takes away my element of surprise, and maybe I'm the first person that they pay attention to.
Interesting. Well, this is all good stuff. I think if it ever comes down to it, you don't want to avoid using force if at all possible.
Basic protection model, which everyone listening is going to hear from me, awareness first. Always understand what's around you, what's behind you, what's in front of you. That way you can avoid the situation, and defense is always a last resort, because that's exactly what the law tells us. Always a last resort. You're absolutely right.
It's about prevention?
It's about prevention, not response.
Let's drill that in our
That's
heads
it.
there.
That's all. That's the only thing you have to remember.
It's the Michael Mann Podcast. Now, you can find Michael's stuff on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. See you next time.